Have you ever wondered why some of the kindest people you know often seem to carry the heaviest weight on their shoulders? The ones who always say yes, who smile even when they are exhausted, who never want to upset anyone. On the surface, they look like the embodiment of goodness, yet deep down, they are often struggling with feelings of emptiness, quiet frustration, and a haunting question that rarely leaves them. Why does being nice not always lead to feeling loved? Why does being harmless sometimes leave you invisible? This is the paradox of niceness, a trap that so many fall into without even realizing it. From the time we are children, many of us are taught that niceness is the highest virtue. Be polite, don't argue, avoid conflict, always think of others before yourself. Society needs compassion, empathy, and cooperation, but there's a fine line between kindness that is powerful and life-giving, and niceness that is draining and self-erasing. When we cross that line, niceness stops being strength, and it becomes something else entirely. It becomes harmlessness, and in a world that doesn't reward harmlessness, this can turn into an invisible prison. Think about it for a moment. Have you ever met someone who was endlessly agreeable, who never voiced their own opinions, who smiled through discomfort and apologized even when they weren't at fault? Did you feel drawn to them, or did they somehow fade into the background? The paradox is that while people admire kindness, they often overlook those who try too hard to never disturb the waters. Niceness can create safety, but it rarely creates respect. It can bring temporary approval, but it rarely builds deep connection, and this is where the trap lies. Psychologists have long studied this dynamic. Research has shown that people who score very high on agreeableness, the personality trait most connected to niceness, are often well-liked but not always well-respected. In fact, studies from organizational psychology reveal that agreeable employees are less likely to be promoted into leadership positions, not because they lack talent, but because their harmlessness makes others unconsciously assume they cannot handle conflict or hard decisions. Niceness alone does not communicate strength. Instead, it communicates that you are safe but perhaps not influential, kind but perhaps not memorable. And yet, for so many of us, being nice feels like the safest way to live. We fear rejection, so we smile. We fear conflict, so we agree. We fear disapproval, so we silence ourselves. Slowly, without realizing it, our authentic self gets buried under layers of politeness. We tell ourselves that we are being good people, but in reality, we are often being invisible people, and invisibility comes at a cost. The cost is that our needs go unmet, our voices go unheard, and our souls begin to quietly resent the mask we wear. Here is where the paradox deepens. The very people who bend over backwards to be liked often feel the loneliest. They give endlessly, but they do not feel truly seen. They avoid conflict, but they secretly long for someone to fight for them. They try to be harmless, but in doing so, they erase the edges of their humanity, and those edges are what make us feel real to each other. Because human beings are not meant to be flat, agreeable surfaces. We are meant to have depth, texture, passion, and yes, even conflict. Without those things, relationships lack spark, and without that spark, people drift away from us without even knowing why. But why do we fall into this trap in the first place? For many, it begins in childhood. Some children grow up learning that love is conditional, that they are valued most when they are quiet, obedient, or helpful. Maybe they had a parent who withdrew affection when they spoke up, or a teacher who praised them for being the good kid who never caused trouble. Over time, the child learns that to be accepted, they must suppress their true self. They must trade authenticity for approval. That lesson, planted early, can grow into a lifelong pattern of self-sacrifice disguised as niceness. And though it looks virtuous from the outside, it leaves the inner self starving. The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche once wrote, "The most dangerous man is the one who has no enemies." He wasn't glorifying conflict. What he meant is that to live without ever offending, without ever drawing lines or standing for something, is to live in a way that dilutes one's existence. True life requires friction. True connection requires honesty. When we avoid those things in the name of niceness, we don't become more lovable, we become more forgettable. And this is why the harmlessness trap is so dangerous. On one hand, it looks good. Niceness gets compliments, smiles, temporary approval. But on the other hand, it robs you of the respect that comes from authenticity. People respect those who stand firm, who have opinions, who can say no when necessary. Niceness without boundaries is not strength. It is compliance. And compliance over time breeds quiet suffering. Here's the irony. The very act of trying to avoid rejection by being endlessly nice often leads to the very rejection we fear. People sense when someone is not fully real. They sense the tension between words and emotions. They may not articulate it, but they feel the absence of authenticity, and it makes connection fragile. We think we are being selfless, but what others feel is distance. They don't know who we truly are, so they can't bond with us in a meaningful way. Niceness without authenticity becomes a wall rather than a bridge. But let's pause here for a moment, because maybe you're thinking, are you saying I should stop being kind? That I should become harsh or selfish? Kindness is not the enemy. Niceness is not evil. The real problem is when niceness becomes a mask, when it turns into the suppression of truth for the sake of harmony. True kindness is powerful because it comes with honesty. It comes with boundaries. It doesn't erase the self, it includes the self. It doesn't make you harmless, it makes you real. And yet, making this shift is terrifying, because to step out of the harmlessness trap is to risk conflict. It is to risk disapproval. It is to step into the unknown of being truly seen, and being truly seen means risking rejection. But here's the deeper truth. Without that risk, we cannot experience real love, real respect, or real belonging. As the psychologist Carl Rogers once said, what is most personal is most universal. When you show up as your full self, including your edges, you open the door for others to truly connect with you. And in that connection, something remarkable happens. You realize you were never meant to be just nice. You were meant to be fully human. Still, many resist this path. The harmlessness trap feels safe. It feels predictable. But that safety comes with a quiet cost. The cost is resentment. The cost is a life lived for others at the expense of yourself. The cost is that when you look in the mirror, you may see a smile, but behind it you may also see a faint sadness. The sadness of a person who gave away too much in the name of being good. And so we are left with a question. Is it truly kind to erase yourself in the name of harmony? Or is it actually a disservice to yourself and to others? Because when you silence your needs, when you hide your truth, when you trade authenticity for approval, you deny the world the chance to know the real you. And perhaps the real you, the one with passion, opinions, and depth, is the one that people were longing to meet all along. The paradox of niceness is that it gives you just enough connection to survive, but not enough to truly thrive. It keeps you safe, but unfulfilled. And so many of us live here, in this in-between space, convincing ourselves that safety is the same as happiness. But deep down, there is a longing for more. A longing to be known, not just tolerated. To be loved, not just liked. To be respected, not just accepted. This is why I call it the harmlessness trap, because the world does not admire harmlessness, it admires strength combined with goodness. Think about the people you look up to most. Are they endlessly agreeable, never rocking the boat, always keeping the peace? Or are they people who are kind but also courageous? People who will help you when you need it, but who will also tell you the hard truth when no one else will. That combination is rare, but it is magnetic, because it reveals someone who is both safe and real. And that balance is what makes someone unforgettable. Let's bring in a little psychology here. Social scientists have studied something called the warmth and competence model of how we perceive others. Warmth is how kind, friendly, or trustworthy someone seems. Competence is how capable, strong, or intelligent they appear. Interestingly, when someone is high in warmth but low in competence, people may like them but not fully respect them. When someone is high in competence but low in warmth, people may respect them but not truly like them. The sweet spot, the place where leaders, visionaries, and loved ones thrive, is when warmth and competence combine. That is what makes people inspiring, trustworthy, and memorable. Niceness without strength only gives you half the equation. And yet, so many people lean only into warmth because they fear that showing strength, boundaries, or conviction will push others away. But paradoxically, the opposite is true. Without strength, warmth feels incomplete. Without boundaries, kindness feels shallow. Without authenticity, niceness feels hollow. The people we love and respect most are not those who never upset us, but those who stand by us with honesty, even when it is uncomfortable. This leads to an even deeper question. What does it actually mean to be kind? True kindness is not about never saying no. It is not about hiding your opinions or keeping silent when something matters to you. True kindness is when you can express your truth with compassion. It's when you can disagree without disrespect, when you can love someone enough to challenge them, and when you can care for others without abandoning yourself. That is kindness, that is strength, and that is the way out of the harmlessness trap. But I know what you might be thinking. If this is true, why do so many of us still cling to niceness? The answer lies in fear. Fear of being disliked, fear of conflict, fear of losing people if we show them who we really are. Niceness is a shield, a way of making sure we don't lose the approval we crave. But here's the hidden cost. By clinging to everyone's approval, we lose our own. And in the end, self-betrayal is the deepest wound of all. Imagine this. You live your whole life saying yes to everyone else. You please, you smile, you adapt. People like you. People say you're wonderful. But when you are alone at night and you look back on the choices you made, you realize that many of them weren't really yours. They were borrowed choices, borrowed lives, borrowed dreams. And suddenly, the applause doesn't feel so comforting anymore. Because what good is being liked if it means being lost to yourself? That realization is painful, but it is also liberating. Because it invites us into a new way of being. A way where kindness is not a mask, but a choice. Where compassion is not weakness, but power. Where niceness is replaced with authenticity. And this shift begins with something deceptively simple. Learning to say no. No is one of the hardest words for people trapped in niceness to speak. It feels harsh, selfish, even cruel. But in reality, no is what gives your yes meaning. If you say yes to everything, your yes carries no weight. But when you say no with clarity and kindness, your yes becomes precious. It becomes real. Boundaries are not walls, they are doors that teach others how to enter your life with respect. The paradox is that when you stop being endlessly nice and start being authentic, you don't lose connection, you gain deeper connection. Because now people are relating to the real you, not the masked version of you. And when people connect with the real you, that bond is stronger, richer, and more lasting than any bond built on politeness alone. Let's go back to the psychology for a moment. The Zeigarnik effect, the principle we discussed earlier about incomplete loops, applies not just to stories, but to human relationships. When you hide parts of yourself, when you leave your true feelings incomplete or unspoken, people sense that something is missing. The loop is never closed, but when you open up honestly, when you let people see your joy, your frustration, your truth, you close the loop. And in closing it, you invite them into real intimacy. This is what turns acquaintances into friends, and friends into soul-deep connections. But authenticity takes courage, and courage is not about eliminating fear. It is about choosing truth despite fear. Every time you risk being real, you step a little further out of the harmlessness trap. You step into the paradox itself and transform it. Because now you are not just nice, you are kind, you are strong, you are memorable. You are no longer harmless, but you are still good. And that is what people are truly drawn to. Maybe you've experienced this yourself. Maybe you've had a moment where you finally spoke up after years of silence, where you finally said no after years of yes, where you finally admitted what you really felt. And maybe it was terrifying. But if you pay attention, you'll also notice something else. People respected you more after that. Maybe they even loved you more. Because honesty creates respect, and respect deepens love. What you feared would push people away may actually draw the right people closer. And this is the ultimate truth of the paradox of niceness. The world does not need you to be harmless. It needs you to be fully alive. Your laughter, your anger, your ideas, your boundaries, all of it matters. When you erase those parts of yourself, you rob others of the chance to know you. But when you reveal them, you give the world a gift that niceness alone can never offer. The gift of your true humanity. So, where does this leave us? Perhaps with a challenge. The next time you feel yourself smiling to keep the peace, ask yourself, Am I being kind or am I being invisible? The next time you feel tempted to say yes out of fear, ask yourself, am I giving from love or from fear of rejection? The next time you swallow your truth, ask yourself, whose approval am I living for, theirs or mine? These questions are not easy, but they are necessary, because they open the door to a life not of endless niceness, but of authentic kindness. And when you live with authentic kindness, something remarkable happens. You still bring light to others, but now it is a light that comes from within, not a borrowed glow from their approval. You still create harmony, but it is a harmony built on truth, not silence. You still give, but you also receive. And slowly, the weight you carried on your shoulders begins to lift, because you realize you were never meant to carry the world by being endlessly agreeable. You were meant to shape the world by being fully yourself. This is the paradox of niceness. Harmlessness may feel safe, but it leaves you unseen. Authentic kindness may feel risky, but it leads to the love and respect you have always longed for. And in the end, that risk is worth it. Because the greatest tragedy is not to be disliked. It is to go through life never being truly known. And the greatest gift is not to be endlessly nice. It is to be fully human, fully real, and fully alive.